Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone, for another trip into occult archives. Today, we're cracking open one of those books that you hear whispered about, the ones that promise forbidden knowledge, the kind of secrets that make you wonder if maybe, just maybe, the author is onto something big.
Yeah, and the book we've got on the table today is definitely in that category. It's Aurora of the Philosophers,
Mm.
a text that's been debated, dissected, and probably feared for centuries.
And just to add to that mystique, this book is heavily connected with the legendary Paracelsus. Oh, and did I mention it's all about the Philosopher's Stone?
Right, the ultimate alchemical prize, said to hold the key to immortality, wealth, and, well, who knows what else. No wonder this book has garnered so much attention over the years.
So let's officially kick off episode 211, Aurora of the Philosophers, Paracelsus and the Divine Fire of Transmutation. Now, when we talk about Paracelsus, we're talking about the Fastus Bombastus von Hohenheim, also known as Paracelsus, the Sage of Hohenheim. This guy was a 16th century physician, alchemist, astrologer, and all-around enigma.
A real Renaissance man, but one who ruffled a lot of feathers in his time. He challenged the medical establishment, embraced magic and alchemy, and generally shook things up wherever he went.
And the Aurora of the Philosophers, published back in 1575, is a bit of a mystery itself. Some scholars argue that it's a genuine work by Paracelsus, while others think it might have been heavily influenced by or even created by his followers.
Yeah, the whole authorship question is a rabbit hole in itself. There's this figure, Gerard Dorn, who edited and annotated that first edition. Some suspect he might have added his own spin to things, maybe even expanding on Paracelsus's original ideas.
Right, so we're starting with a bit of a puzzle already. Is this pure, unadulterated Paracelsus, or is it a blend of his thinking and the broader alchemical traditions of his time?
And that's what we're here to figure out.
Exactly. We're going to delve into the core ideas within the Aurora, particularly its perspective on the Philosopher's Stone, where it comes from, what it is, and how you might, hypothetically, go about creating it. Now, we know you don't have all day, so we'll try to cut to the chase and highlight the most important points, like a treasure map leading you straight to the good stuff.
No need to sift through mountains of alchemical jargon.
All right, so the book opens with a pretty bold claim. It basically says that Adam, the first human, was also the first, well, everything, the first artist, the first scientist, the first to understand the secrets of the natural world.
Like a walking encyclopedia of creation. It's setting up this idea of a kind of primordial, perfect knowledge that existed from the very beginning.
And this knowledge, it says, included a prophecy of a future cataclysm, the flood. To preserve this vital understanding, they inscribed all this knowledge on 2 stone tablets, kind of like the original Wikipedia. Imagine trying to fit everything we know about the world onto a couple of rocks.
A monumental task. And of course, as the story goes, Noah finds one of these tablets after the flood, tucked away under Mount Arath. This tablet laid out the movements of the stars and the workings of nature, a direct link from the dawn of humanity to the wisdom of the ancients.
And then things get interesting. You have this vast unified knowledge, and then it starts to, well, splinter. It branches out into separate fields: astronomy, magic, the Kabbalah, and eventually what we call alchemy.
Like a tree growing from a single seed, but with branches reaching in all different directions. But the key point here is they all share that same origin point, that same root.
And according to the Aurora, this knowledge traveled with Abraham from Canaan to Egypt. And wouldn't you know it, Egypt becomes the new intellectual hotspot. They became so renowned for their wisdom that other nations flocked to learn from them. Even biblical figures like Jacob are said to have tapped into this tradition.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The Aurora paints this picture of magic, the Kabbalah and alchemy, not as fringe practices, but as the pinnacle of philosophy in these ancient cultures. Chaldea, Persia, Egypt, and even amongst the Hebrews. We're talking about Moses being educated in Egyptian lore and Daniel becoming a master of Chaldean Kabbalah.
So it's weaving these familiar figures into this narrative of a secret, powerful tradition passed down through the ages. And get this, the Persians would only allow wise men to become kings, and the Magi, who sought out Jesus, they were part of this natural priesthood connected to this deep, ancient wisdom.
Right, it's like they were the gatekeepers of this incredible knowledge. But then the Aurora shifts gears and turns its focus westward to the Greeks.
And here's where things start to, well, go a bit off track. The Aurora suggests that while the Greeks were definitely intrigued by this Egyptian wisdom, some even traveled to Egypt to study, they ultimately took a detour, a wrong turn that led them away from the true path.
They were, shall we say, a little too confident in their own intellectual abilities. They weren't satisfied with Mosaic law, so they relied on their own genius, straying from what the Aurora considers the right foundation.
So in the Aurora's view, the Greeks kind of messed things up.
Well, not entirely. They got some things right, but they introduced these fabulous conceptions, these misunderstandings of Moses' teachings. The Aurora even acknowledges that the Greeks adopted the Egyptian practice of using enigmatic symbols to convey wisdom. Think Homer, Pythagoras, they all borrowed from this tradition.
So there's still a thread connecting them, but it's getting tangled, maybe even a bit frayed. The Aurora mentions figures like Hippocrates, Thales, Anaxagoras, Democritus, all brilliant minds, but they were supposedly held back by their pride, their unwillingness to fully learn from older traditions.
And because of that, they ended up presenting insights mixed with these subtle fictions. And these ideas eventually morphed into a Latin-derived philosophy that spread throughout Europe, further distancing itself from the original source.
So we have this clear contrast. The wisdom of the East, rooted in tradition and divine revelation, versus the philosophy of the West, based more on human reason and, according to the Aurora, straying from the true path.
And the book goes on to really hammer home this difference, emphasizing that the Chaldeans, Persians, and Egyptians all share the same core knowledge about nature's secrets, the same understanding of how it all connects with the divine. It even argues that Moses, Abraham, Solomon, and the Magi who visited Jesus were the true masters of this tradition.
And what about the Greeks? They don't get a seat at this table.
They're pretty much relegated to the realm of mere speculation. The Aurora suggests their approach was more theoretical, lacking the practical, divinely inspired foundation of that ancient wisdom.
Okay, so we've established what true wisdom isn't, according to the Aurora. Now let's get into what it is. It dives into the nature of true magic and the Kabbalah. What are those all about?
The Aurora presents magic as the art of understanding the basic building blocks of reality, their properties, and how they interact in hidden ways. It's about understanding those fundamental forces and substances that make up the world around us.
So magic is about cracking the code of nature.
In a way, yes. And then you have the Kabbalah, which is about delving into the deeper meaning of scriptures, unlocking the path to divine knowledge and even prophecy. It's about understanding those hidden messages within sacred texts.
So one is about the natural world and the other is about the divine. But are they completely separate?
Not necessarily. The Aurora suggests that both magic and the Kabbalah offer a way to see the future and understand the present. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of everything, from the heavens to the earth.
And then we come to this concept of Gamahea. Sounds pretty mystical.
It's described as the point where celestial influences and the fundamental elements meet and merge, a kind of marriage between the cosmic forces and earthly substances. This union, according to the Aurora, is what gives rise to all the forms we see in the world, from the stars and planets to the plants, minerals, and animals.
It's like a cosmic blueprint that guides creation. And where does the power of magic come from?
The Aurora claims that the very source of magic is the divine ternary, the Holy Trinity. It suggests that this threefold nature is imprinted on all of creation. You then have the ternary combining with the magical quaternary, those four classical elements giving rise to the septenary, the number 7, which is full of hidden secrets.
So we're seeing these numbers, 3, 4, 7, having a much deeper significance. And what's the ultimate goal of understanding all this?
It's about seeing the unity within the multiplicity, about tracing everything back to that single source. The quaternary and ternary ascending to the denary, the number 10, and then back to unity. It's a journey back to the origin of all things.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork for how the universe works, at least according to the Aurora. Now let's get to the heart of the matter, the Philosopher's Stone. What does this book tell us about this legendary substance?
It calls it the chief and supreme essence of things, and it describes this belief held by the ancient Magi, that everything in creation can be unified into a single perfected substance. This substance, through purification and refinement, can reach a state of divine essence with incredible powers. And that's what they call the quintessence.
The ultimate goal of alchemy. But how do you even begin to achieve something like that?
The process starts with what the Aurora calls a supreme magical separation, going back to a primal state, followed by a series of elaborate preparations to elevate the substance. It's like a step-by-step ascent, from the plant realm to the mineral, then to the metallic, and finally reaching the divine quintessence, which embodies the essence of everything in existence.
It's like distilling the entire cosmos into a single, super potent entity. What about the Greeks and Arabs we talked about earlier? Did they have any clue about this?
The Aurora suggests they had a glimpse, a partial understanding, gleaned from those veiled writings of the Persians and Egyptians. They saw some of the effects, but couldn't fully grasp the super-celestial operations behind it.
So they were on the right track, but they missed the bigger picture.
That's the idea. They focused on the arcanum of the Philosopher's Stone, a term attributed to Pythagoras, but they missed the divine, the super-celestial element. And to protect the true secret, they shrouded it in all sorts of cryptic symbols and misleading terms, making it even harder to understand.
So much for clarity. And that brings us to the errors in seeking the stone. The Aurora is pretty critical of some common alchemical practices.
It calls out those philosophers who used vague names based on superficial similarities, calling the stone vegetable, animal, or mineral, without understanding the deeper metaphorical meaning behind those terms.
So when alchemists talked about a vegetable stone, they weren't literally talking about some kind of plant.
Right. They were using analogies like there's this image of a golden tree with 7 branches, symbolizing that the stone contains the essence of all 7 metals, but hidden within. Or the colors that appear during the stone's creation, they're compared to flowers blossoming, but again, it's an analogy, not a literal recipe.
And the text is equally critical of those who look for the stone in specific plants, like celandine or lac virginis, that milky sap from certain plants.
Yeah, it calls that a foolish error. While some plant extracts might show certain chemical reactions, that's just because of their chemical makeup, not because they contain the true matter of the stone.
And those who look to the animal kingdom, blood, urine, eggs, they even tried lizards.
The Aurora is very clear. The matter of the philosophers is not to be sought in animals. Those animal names they used, like lac virginis or blessed blood, it's more about symbolic associations, maybe hinting at spiritual purification, not actual animal ingredients. There's a whole bunch of weird experiments they did with animal products, but the Aurora considers them all pointless.
Okay, so plants and animals are out. But surely alchemy is all about minerals and metals, right?
Well, while the Aurora acknowledges the amazing transformations that happen naturally within the mineral world, it says the true substance of the Philosopher's Stone doesn't come from any particular mineral. It even calls out those who went to extreme lengths with mercury, subjecting it to countless sublimations and all sorts of corrosive agents.
And it's not a fan of some of the big names in alchemy, like Geber or Albertus Magnus.
It criticizes those who meticulously followed their often very complex and confusing instructions. It even says those processes of purification, fixation, distillation, all those classic alchemical techniques are completely unproductive in the search for the true stone. Even when they achieve some transformations, like whitening copper with arsenic, the Aurora sees that as deceptive, just a surface change, not true perfection.
So it's basically tearing down all these conventional approaches, and then it finally reveals Paracelsus's own method, the true arcana. This is where things get really interesting.
Right, this is the unveiling of the real secrets, according to the Aurora. It presents 3 distinct arcana as the foundation of true alchemy. Arsenic for the white tincture, vitriol for the red tincture, and antimony for the process of transmutation.
Let's start with arsenic, not exactly the first thing that comes to mind when you think of positive transformations.
The Aurora acknowledges the debates about arsenic's composition, but says it's essentially sulfurous. The key thing, according to this book, is its ability to whiten copper. But it also criticizes previous writers on arsenic, saying their writings were either wrong or intentionally misleading.
And the true philosopher's method with arsenic involves separating its 3 natural spirits.
That's right. It describes a volatile, combustible, and corrosive spirit, a crystalline and sweet spirit, and most importantly, a tinging spirit. The goal is to isolate and purify this tinging spirit.
How do they do that? Sounds pretty complicated.
They combine it with the spirit of Luna, which is silver, and digest it for 32 days until a new substance forms. Then, on the 40th day, they expose it to the sun's heat, which ignites it into a bright white spirit. And that spirit has the power to transform imperfect metals into high-quality silver.
That's a very specific and evocative process. Okay, on to vitriol and the red tincture. Vitriol, also known as sulfuric acid, sounds like something you need to handle very carefully.
The Aurora calls it a very noble mineral with incredible properties. It gives this cryptic clue: go to the inner parts of the earth, and thou shalt find the occult stone, a true medicine. The earth here is said to represent vitriol and the inner parts, its hidden sweetness and redness.
And the key to getting this red tincture is to avoid calcination and distillation. That seems to go against a lot of what we've heard so far.
Exactly. The Aurora emphasizes keeping vitriol's green color, because that's where the blood red oil, the true arcanum, is hidden. It compares this to how nature slowly transforms plant liquids into a yellow, then a blood red oil. Impatience, it says, destroys that vital green component.
So the right way is to extract the green essence with water, purify it carefully, and keep it away from sunlight.
And then they digest it in a sealed glass vessel for months until it turns deep red. Then they purify it further with vinegar to remove any impurities, and that's the blessed oil.
Then there's this intriguing step called the supercelestial marriage. What's that all about?
It's where they distill the spirit from the oil, keep the white residue, and then reunite the soul and spirit, that blood red oil, with his purified body, the white residue, in a sealed vessel. They digest this for 40 days in a special furnace, and that produces the absolute oil that can transform mercury and other base metals into gold. It even talks about a way to increase the potency of this oil using metallic mercury.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
Now, finally, antimony and its role in transmutation. Antimony has this long and kind of strange history in alchemy.
The Aurora calls it the true bath of gold, the crucible where Vulcan purified Phoebus, which represents the sun or gold. It says antimony is born from the purest forms of mercury and sulfur under the influence of vitriol. The process starts by dissolving high-quality antimony in its own corrosive acid, adding crocus of Mars, an iron compound, and then precipitating it in cold water to remove impurities.
Sounds like a very delicate process.
It is. They then combine it with calcined tutia, which is zinc oxide, and sublimate it. They have to be incredibly careful not to crack the vessel from the heat. They then take the sublimate, put it in a sealed vial with water, and heat it very slowly for 10 days, watching the colors change in the vapor. Eventually, this creates a red substance.
And what are the final steps to unleash antimony's power?
They dissolve the red substance in strong vinegar, get rid of the impurities, evaporate the vinegar, and then redissolve the residue in distilled water. They repeat that evaporation process. Finally, they strongly distill the sediment in a sealed vessel, which gives them a deep red oil, like the color of a ruby, fragrant and sweet. This, according to the Aurora, is the supreme arcanum of the philosophers hidden within antimony. They combine this with an oil of sol, gold dissolved in purified alcohol, and gently heat them for a philosophical month to create the final product, an oil that can perfect mercury and other base metals into true gold.
This is incredible stuff. The Aurora even talks about the practical side of things, the actual process of projection with antimony, and it seems the exact amounts aren't set in stone, so to speak.
No, the potency of the tincture can vary, and success depends on the purity of the medicine, the skill of the alchemist, and the purity of the base metal. The Aurora even suggests ways to correct imbalances, either by adding more tincture or more base metal.
And this idea of revivification or animation of the base metals before projection, that seems super important.
It's like a spiritual preparation of the metal. It describes a method for animating Venus, which is copper. They coat small plates with arsenic and calcined carder, then repeatedly calcine and wash them to remove impurities. Then they add pure luna, silver. The Aurora emphasizes the need for a perfect ferment to help medicine penetrate and expel opposing elements. And it warns against using impure sulfur, which could contaminate the whole process.
This is all so complex and demanding. It's not just about chemistry, it's about symbolism, precision, and a deep understanding of nature's hidden workings. But where does the universal matter of the Philosopher's Stone come from? What's its origin?
The Aurora explains that just like plants can turn into minerals over long periods within the earth through the actions of sulfur and salt, so too does the Philosopher's Stone have its own primal matter. Finding and understanding this substance is described as incredibly difficult.
But the key, it says, is to look at the root and seed of things.
Right, it's about understanding nature's inherent drive toward perfection. The Aurora says everything is made of natural mercury, sulfur, and salt, in either a volatile or fixed state. Nature uses a separating fire deep within the earth to purify these elements, creating a pure, gigamic body, a unified entity of body, soul, and spirit. This is what they call philosophical mercury.
And this philosophical mercury then combines with chaotic sulfur to form metals, but this isn't the regular mercury and sulfur we're familiar with.
Exactly. The philosopher's mercury and sulfur are different. They're found within perfect metals, making them resistant to fire and decay. And philosophical mercury, according to the Aurora, is extracted from perfect bodies, the sun and the moon, which represent gold and silver. They're the roots. The stone itself is described as water coagulated within Sol and Luna.
So the basic building blocks are, in a way, gold and silver.
Symbolically, yes. They're united in a proper marriage, both natural and alchemically achieved. But just like you need both male and female to create life, you need a third thing for the stone. The animated seed of both, which is philosophical Mercury.
Philosophical Mercury sounds pretty amazing.
The Aurora says it's composed of body, spirit, and soul, possessing the qualities of all four elements. That's why they call it animal, and their atom, with a hidden Eve. It quotes philosopher Almadir, who says this Mercury is extracted from a perfect metal in two perfect natural conditions, allowing it to resist fire because its outer perfection protects its inner imperfection. That's the Adamic matter, the essence of the microcosm. And the Philosopher's Stone itself is a fiery and perfect Mercury, the alchemically created hermaphrodite, embodying both atom and the microcosm.
This is getting pretty deep. But how do you prepare this elusive matter? The Aurora seems to reject most standard alchemical methods.
It says those are just particular solutions and not the real deal. It emphasizes the secret fire of the philosophers, saying that's all you need for the true matter. Terms like putrefaction, distillation, sublimation, those refer to nature's processes happening within the substance itself, guided by the philosophic fire, not by regular heat and manual manipulation.
So it's more about internal natural transformation, not external forces.
Yes, the white and red stages emerge from a single root, going through self-dissolution, self-union, color changes, all guided by this special fire. It even says trying to forcefully separate elements in perfect metals is useless because nature has its own way of doing that.
And what about the tools, the philosophic vessel? Is that just any old flask?
Definitely not. The Aurora criticizes those who misunderstand the vessel, saying some even think you need multiple vessels for different stages. True philosophers use one vessel for everything leading up to the red stone.
And this vessel needs to be special.
It needs to be designed in a way that lets the celestial bodies influence the matter inside. That celestial influence is crucial from the very beginning. It needs precise geometric proportions, a definite quadrature of the circle, so the separated spirit and soul can rise up towards the heavens.
So if they mess up the dimensions, bad things can happen.
Yeah, the matter could get violently excited by the fire, the vessel could shatter, or the whole thing could be a waste of time if the vessel's too big for the heat to work properly. The material of the vessel is a secret known only to those who've successfully reduced the matter to its primal quintessence.
This is getting more and more intricate. And then there's the secret fire of the philosophers. That sounds like the biggest mystery of all.
The Aurora sums it up with the phrase, "Let fire in Azok suffice thee." It's the core of the whole work. But it warns against using regular heat sources like dung, coal, lamps, or chemical baths.
So it's not a literal fire.
The Aurora quotes several philosophers on this. Almadir talks about invisible rays, a celestial heat that helps solidify mercury and create metals. He describes it as vaporous, digesting, continuous, enclosed, airtight, not burning in the normal sense, but still able to change and penetrate substances.
So it's more like a subtle energy or influence.
Almanzar calls it a corrosive fire that makes a cloud-like vapor above the vessel, hiding its powerful rays. Almadir says this fire gently warms the philosophic sun, the alchemical matter with its moisture, which he calls the excrement of the mountain. This occult fire is kindled by the subtle spirit of regular fire, pushing heated chaos upwards to help with a gentle and continuous creation process.
Okay, that's pretty mind-bending. Finally, we have the ferment of the philosophers and the weight. What role do these play?
Ferments are super important in alchemy. Hermes, in the Book of the Seven Treatises, is quoted saying ferments are simply their own perfected essence. The ferment of gold is perfect gold. The ferment of silver is perfect silver. Ferments help whiten the alchemical confection, prevent it from burning, regulate the tincture, stabilize the substances, and enhance their union. They're considered both the key and the goal of the work. And the Aurora warns against looking for the art in regular substances like sulfur or arsenic, because the true substance is the same as what needs to be extracted and perfected.
And weight has both a natural and a more mystical side.
Yes. Natural weight is about the right proportions of earth, water, air, and fire in the process. Getting those right is crucial. Artificial weight is more occult, with the sulfur acting as the link between spirit, soul, and body. The Aurora says the philosophical matter is combined with a red, fixed sulfur in a specific ratio, which leads to the stone's perfection. It stays with its fire and has the same weight as the original matter without any change. Once the matter is prepared and combined in the right proportions, they seal it in the vessel and expose it to the secret fire, And that's when the philosophic sun will rise, bringing success to those who patiently wait for it.
Wow, that was quite a journey through the intricate world of the Aurora of the philosophers. It's amazing how this book, whether it's purely by Paracelsus or heavily influenced by his school, presents such a unique and elaborate system of alchemical thought.
It's a fascinating blend of ancient wisdom, complex philosophical ideas, and what seem like practical instructions, although heavily veiled in symbolism. It definitely goes way beyond simple laboratory experiments.
The key takeaways for me are the pursuit of the Philosopher's Stone as the ultimate goal, the criticism of conventional alchemy, and the introduction of Paracelsus's arcana of arsenic, vitriol, and antimony as paths to the white and red tinctures. And of course, the heavy use of symbolism throughout is impossible to miss.
It really makes you think. Given our fascination with transmutation and ultimate knowledge, to what extent is Paracelsus's work in the Aurora a genuine scientific exploration for its time, and to what extent does it delve into deeper, maybe even spiritual realms of understanding nature and transformation? What can we learn today from this historical exploration of matter and its potential for profound change?
That's a question worth pondering. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the Aurora of the Philosophers. It's a book that continues to spark curiosity and debate, and hopefully we've shed some light on its mysterious contents.
It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring the mysteries of the past.